Hi, I'm Claire, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite science fiction and fantasy adaptations. Just to clarify, these are my favorite SFF movies that happen to be adaptations, rather than movies I think are the best at adapting the works that they are based on. Last month I wanted to talk about my favorite SFF media, films, TV shows, video games, board games, and I had so many things that I wanted to talk about that this one video idea had to be split into two videos, one focusing on science fiction and the other on fantasy. And even doing that, I still had way too much to talk about, so I had to find a way to divide the videos even further to keep the length of them down. And what I did is I took out all the adaptations from the list to talk about in a later video. And this here is that video. We're going to go through some of my favorite SFF movies and TV series that were adapted from books. Some of these I think are magnificent adaptations. There are others where I like the way it was adapted just fine, and some where I haven't read the source material, so I can't really judge. And I'll let you know which is which as we go through the video, but I won't talk about it in too much detail because we have a lot to talk about. I definitely have many more thoughts than I can fit in this video about what makes a good adaptation, and I would like to talk more about that with all of you in the comments below, and also probably in a future video, because I'm gonna be honest, I already have some notes about it in my planning journal. So let's get started with an obvious one, the Lord of the Rings movie trilogy directed by Peter Jackson, based on the J.R.R. Tolkien novels. Now, I'm in my 30s, so these movies came out when I was in high school. I was a nerdy kid, I was already into the mythology of Lord of the Rings at that point, and these movies were such a big deal to me, as I know they were to many people. And the thing is, it's been 15 years and those films have aged pretty well. It's not just that it's an excellent adaptation in terms of translating the tone and the scope of the story from one medium to another, but also that the effects have held up really well because so much of it was practical work instead of CG. I feel like I keep saying this in these videos, but just talking about these movies makes me want to do a full rewatch, like extended edition and all. Next up is a much more recent favorite, the movie Arrival. Directed by Denis Villeneuve and starring Amy Adams, this one is based on a short story by Ted Chiang called Story of Your Life. And it's a first contact story that's all about language, so basically catnip. We follow linguistics professor Dr. Louise Banks, who is recruited by the US Army to learn how to communicate with the mysterious aliens who have just landed their gigantic ominous spaceships at various points across the globe. There's obviously a lot of tension between different groups who disagree on how to deal with the aliens, the scientific team, the military high-ups, other world governments, anti-alien activists online, all that good stuff. The premise of the story is really intriguing, but what I love about this movie is that the aliens are truly alien. They're not little green men, they're barely seen, huge, pretty unfathomable entities, and even their language is mind-bogglingly different from what we know. There's no alphabet, all their communication is through these images of circles that are halfway between ink splotches and coffee stains. I can't say much about how the film works as an adaptation because I haven't read the short story yet, but I do own the anthology that it's in, so hopefully I'll be reading it soon. Next we have Howls Moving Castle, an animated film written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki, loosely based on the Diana Wynne Jones novel of the same name. The film opens with our protagonist Sophie being cursed by a witch and turned into a very old woman. She sets off to try and find a way to break the curse and ends up at the home of the wizard Howl, which happens to be a great big castle walking around the countryside. I love the characters and the world building in this story. I don't think anyone quite weaves magic into their story in as seamless a way as Diana Wynne Jones did. Getting the atmosphere and the aesthetic of a Miyazaki movie layered over that is just wonderful. The book and the movie are quite different, but I love them both equally. This to me is an example of a great adaptation that doesn't stick very closely to the source material, but manages to convey just the right tone, just the right atmosphere, and to just fit really well. It takes liberties with the plot of the book, but it somehow manages to feel like a Diana Wynne Jones story and feel like a Miyazaki story at the same time. Next is the recent TV adaptation of Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, which was created by Bruce Miller and stars Elizabeth Moss as Offred, our protagonist and the titular handmaid. The story is set in this incredibly bleak near-future dystopia in which fertile women are forced into sexual and childbearing servitude for rich governing families, and we follow Offred as she tries to survive her life as a handmaid and the everyday brutality of Gilead. She remembers having her own life before Gilead, her own identity, her own job, her own bank account, her own family. She's hanging on to the hopes that she may be able to escape someday and find her daughter again. Like I said, the story itself is incredibly bleak, and a TV series that does not shy away from that at all. It forces the viewer to witness the reality of the Gilead regime. It's tense, it's uncomfortable, and what I really appreciate about the show is that none of the changes that they made from the book are there to make it an easier story to stomach, which is why it works really well as an adaptation in my opinion. They did such a fantastic job with season 1. I'm really intrigued to see what they have in store for season 2, even though they won't be going off of the book anymore. Going Postal is a 2-part TV movie adaptation of the novel by the late great Terry Pratchett, and it was directed by John Jones. This is a Discworld story about con artist Moist von Lipwig, who gets arrested by the Ankh-Morpork City Watch and is condemned to death for his many criminal schemes. Except being hanged by the neck doesn't kill Moist. It sends him straight to Lord Vetinari's office, where he's offered the chance to not die if he agrees to become the new postmaster of Ankh-Morpork, which isn't all that easy of a job as it turns out. This movie is so much fun to watch. Of course it's hilarious because Terry Pratchett, and at the same time there's a lot of depth and emotional weight to the story because Terry Pratchett, and the cast is also fantastic and absolutely spot on. I love, love, love Dorabelle Dearheart. Now I haven't read any of the Moist von Lipwig books yet, so I don't know how close of an adaptation this is, but it feels to me like the Discworld. It feels like a Terry Pratchett story, which I think is pretty important. And I do want to read the books. I've been making my way through the Discworld. I've read about 15 of the books so far, and I know I will read the full 41 someday. I just don't want to rush it. I don't want to run out of new to me Discworld books. Next up is Coraline, a stop-motion dark fantasy children's movie directed by Henry Selick based on the novel by Neil Gaiman. The story follows Coraline, a girl whose family has just moved into a large old house, and while exploring the house, Coraline finds a trapdoor in one of the rooms. So obviously she goes through the trapdoor and she finds herself in this mirrored version of her own house, inhabited by a mirrored version of her own parents. Everything is all fine and dandy for a while, with the other father and the other mother paying a lot more attention to Coraline and giving her things that she wants, except they also definitely want to sew buttons in place of Coraline's eyes so she can fit in properly with her new family. This is such a delightfully creepy story about being careful what you wish for and things being almost but not quite right. It's a really good adaptation insofar as both the film and the book have moments in them that I found utterly terrifying. My being a wimp aside, the stop-motion animation style really serves to reinforce the uncanny, not quite right feeling to the other mother and the other father and the whole other world on the other side of the trapdoor. Next, we've got a cult classic, The Princess Bride, directed by Rob Reiner based on the novel by William Goldman. This is of course the story of Princess Buttercup, her farm boy Wesley, and how true love triumphs over all. We've got treasonous plots, princess kidnappings, cool sword fights, inconceivably tense riddles, the dread pirate Roberts, and of course, sweet, sweet revenge. This movie is very, very silly and very, very funny. I would certainly prefer for Buttercup to have a more active role in the story, but I still love so many things about this one. Again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, just talking about this makes me want to rewatch it. The Princess Bride as an adaptation is quite interesting to me because I think it really improves from the book. I read it a long time ago, but I remember not enjoying it all that much at all. There are things that just don't work as well in the book. The humor doesn't come through as convincingly for one, and yet the author of the novel also wrote the screenplay. And finally we have The Martian, a science fiction film directed by Ridley Scott and starring Matt Damon, based on the novel by Andy Weir. This is the story of Mark Watney, an astronaut who is presumed dead during the emergency evacuation of the Mars mission that he was on, and who ends up being left behind on Mars. Now dead, but not in a great position either. In order to survive, Watney has to, quote, science the shit out of this and eat a whole lot of raw potatoes while listening to a whole lot of disco. This is a really fast-paced, tense movie with a top-notch cast, and I also think that it's an excellent book-to-movie adaptation. I have a lot of thoughts about this as an adaptation, and I'm not going to discuss those here because I did a full video about it back when the movie first came out. So if you're interested in The Martian and my thoughts about how it was adapted, you should check out that video. And also let me know if you'd like to see more videos like that, because I recently rewatched that video on The Martian and I was pretty damn happy with it. It really gave me a hankering for making more of this type of videos, like kind of a narrative deep dive into why stuff works or doesn't. So just let me know in the comments. So that's it, these were some of my favorite sci-fi and fantasy films and TV shows based on books. Let me know what you think about my picks in the comments below. Have I left out some of your favorites? I'd love to hear what you think. If you'd like to see more from me, you can check out a previous video on screen right now. And if you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button that's on my face for a new video from me every week. I've been Claire, thanks so much for watching, and see you soon.